finally somebody reached out and had something to say that was unambiguous, and that's important to me. I don't like any mealy-mouthed talk. Don't tap and tiptoe around the edges. Tell me what you mean. Tell me exactly what you're saying, and he did it. I'm talking about Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, who came out with a statement defending the American police officer. Senator Cruz, thanks for joining me.
Sheriff Clarke, thank you for having me, and thank you for serving every day, for protecting our country, and for standing up and speaking the truth. It is needed now more than ever.
It's a pleasure to serve, Senator, but why do you think that, I mean, you were the first one. I know Scott Walker has come out since. Why have the candidates for President of the United States kind of avoided this whole backlash against the American police officer? And what made you finally come out and say, hey, look, I have my finger on the pulse of the American public, and right now this is bothering the people, and that needs to be said?
Well, you know, unfortunately, with a lot of politicians in Washington, there's a spirit of fear and a spirit of timidity. They're afraid to speak up. They're afraid to speak the truth. You know, I've spent much of my adult life working with law enforcement, working as the Solicitor General of Texas, dealing with prosecutions of rapists and murderers and child molesters. And what we've seen the last 6.5 years with the President of the United States vilifying and demonizing police officers, demonizing our first responders and law enforcement. And we've seen that from the Justice Department. We've seen that from Democratic politicians across this country who over and over again hold up for attack and ridicule the brave men and women that are risking their lives to defend ourselves. And it's wrong. And unfortunately, we're seeing the consequences of that kind of rhetoric, that kind of vitriol. And we need to speak up. I stand unambiguously with the police officers, with the firefighters, with the EMS responders, with all the first responders who every day risk their lives to keep us safe. And we need to stop this politically correct doublespeak and thank the men and women who protect us.
One of the things that I noticed in your statement, and I read it several times because I was looking for, you know, is there some daylight in here? Is there some space in here that he's trying to, not accusing you of it, but I wanted to make sure that It was what I was actually reading. You pointed to the President of the United States. You have probably heard me, Senator. I've been very outspoken in defending the American police officer. I've said that President Barack Obama has breathed life into this movement. He has been, with his inflammatory rhetoric, he created this opportunity, if you will, for these cop haters, these anarchists, to come out of the shadows and come and operate above board and in broad daylight, right in front of our faces with this vitriol, this vile. Why were you not afraid to lay this at the foot of one of the people that got this started, and that's President Barack Obama?
Well, because it's the truth, and you know, in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth can be a revolutionary act. We have got to speak the truth right now. You know, I hearken back to the 1960s. You remember the 1968 Democratic Convention where there were riots, and it used to be the radicals and the anarchists and those on the fringes of society that would attack and vilify police officers. It's changed, and it's now gone to the upper echelons of our government. And we saw this right at the beginning of the Obama administration, where there was the incident with the Cambridge police up in Massachusetts, and the president immediately attacked the cops, blamed the cops, and it ended with the so-called beer summit. We saw the rhetoric escalate with what happened in Ferguson, with what happened in Baltimore. And I'll tell you what I thought was actually the most shameful of all of it, was when this president nominated to a senior position in the Justice Department a lawyer who had volunteered his time to represent for free a cop killer. And I helped lead the opposition in the Senate to confirming that individual. And I'm proud to say we defeated that nomination, even in Harry Reid's Senate. Democratic senators said this is too much. But, you know, there is a Go ahead.
You would be talking about Debo Adegbile, a cop-hating lawyer who inserted himself into the case of the cop killer out of Philadelphia, Abu Jamal, and he made him a folk hero and went on a crusade. I'm talking about Deborah Adegbile, who was nominated by Barack Obama to head the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. So you got a cop-hating racist who's going to – can you imagine him with that kind of power and what that would have meant? And the thing that really got me, Senator, is I sat in Washington, D.C. at a National Sheriff's Association conference with the major county sheriffs and the major county chiefs in a joint meeting. Eric Holder was there, and we begged Eric Holder to please do what you can to convince the President of the United States to withdraw that nomination of Debo Adegbile. He will not be good for law enforcement. He will not be good for race relations in this country. We begged him. And, Holder kind of, I understand, I hear you. And he went forth with the nomination anyway, at least submitting it to the Senate. And thankfully, you and your colleagues, it wasn't even close, really, did not confirm. But the thing is, Barack Obama previously, before that, had nominated Debo Adegbile to be a federal judge. And fortunately, Adegbile had the wherewithal, probably out of embarrassment, to withdraw the nomination. He knew that he wasn't going to be confirmed. Here's what as a career law enforcement officer, and the top cop, if you will, in Milwaukee County, here's what I'm looking for in an attorney general. And here's the question I'll be asking people running for president. I want to get a sense of what kind of person you will be looking for to be your attorney general to the United States Department of Justice. I'm looking for an attorney general, Senator, who will look at local law enforcement and see them as an ally in the pursuit of justice. Right now, at least the previous Attorney General, Eric Holder, saw us as the enemy. The recently confirmed Loretta Lynch, I think it's a little early, but at the same time, I'm not seeing a lot where she looks at us and says, we're allies in this thing. Under Eric Holder, the cop became the enemy. We weren't targeting criminals anymore. We were targeting police officers and police agencies. This federal takeover of law enforcement agencies, an attempt to federalize local law enforcement, is very dangerous. Your take?
You are exactly right. And we've seen from the Department of Justice that should be standing arm in arm with law enforcement at the state and local level, working to keep this country safe. Instead, we've seen every time there's an incident, the Justice Department sides against the police. And one of the consequences of that, as you know full well, is police officers across the country are feeling the assault. And sadly, we're seeing cops who are holding back, who are afraid to do their jobs. Because if they do their jobs, they're afraid they're going to be held up, they're going to be vilified, they may lose their jobs, lose their livelihood, lose their family. And the consequence we're seeing in major cities all across the country, crime skyrocketing, murder rates skyrocketing, robbery rates skyrocketing. You look at Baltimore. Following the riots, following the vilification of police in Baltimore, the month of July was the bloodiest month in Baltimore since 1972. 45 people were killed in Baltimore this past July, and I would point out all but 2 of the murder victims were African American. Protesters talk about Black Lives Matter. I agree. And what about those 43 black individuals who were murdered in Baltimore, and the fact that vilifying the cops contributed to creating an environment where the murderers and criminals could have easier prey on innocent Americans? It's wrong. And you asked what kind of attorney general I would appoint as president. Any attorney general needs to be blind to party or ideology. Any attorney general needs to have fidelity only to the laws and Constitution of the United States. And law enforcement is meant to protect the people and stand with the American people. And you have my word, if I'm elected president, we are going to restore integrity to the United States Department of Justice.
Senator, that's music to my ears, because anybody who thinks that there's no correlation to the rising crime rates in the American ghetto across these major urban centers in the United States, is kidding themselves. The American law enforcement officer is hesitating. They're not engaging in what we call self-initiated policing, although the officer in Fox Lake, Illinois, who was gunned down the other day, was engaging in precisely that. He saw something, he didn't like the looks of it, and he established his reasonable suspicion and went over to investigate, and it cost him his life. Cops are pulling back from that sort of thing. Senator, I only have a minute left. You haven't gone after Donald Trump, and I don't think it's smart to do it anyway. Anybody who has, why not?
I like and respect Donald Trump, and a lot of people are getting energized by him because they're looking for someone who will stand up to Washington and speak the truth. And I'll tell you, a lot of people are getting excited, and a lot of those folks are coming over and supporting my campaign because the natural next question is, okay, who actually has a record of standing up to Washington, taking up not just Democrats, but taking on members of their own party, Republicans, taking on Republican leadership. And, our support has exploded. I mean, we saw just in the 100 hours after the last debate, we raised $1.1 million as people all over the country went to tedcruz.org, contributed, volunteered. And in fact, next week, I'm hosting a huge rally on Capitol Hill to oppose this catastrophic Iran deal. I invited Donald Trump to join us because he'll bring reporters, he'll bring TV cameras, he'll help focus the media on this issue, and I'm doing everything I can to lead the fight to stop this catastrophic Iran deal and protect this country.
Strategically, I think that's brilliant, if you ask me. That's just my personal opinion. Senator, I'm out of time, but I want to thank you for joining us here today on the Sean Hannity radio program. Hang in there, grind it out. This is a marathon. I think you're going to be fine.
Well, thank you, Sheriff Clarke. Thank you for standing up. And I'll mention one final thing in the last second. Just today, Kimberly Davis in Kentucky was arrested for standing for her faith, standing for her Christian faith. It is wrong. I stand with Kim Davis unequivocally. And America is not a country where Christians are locked in jail for living according to their faith. And we need to come together and stand against this judicial tyranny that is fundamentally wrong.